This Week with George Stephanopoulos starts right now.
The president gets COVID.
I wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now. We're working hard to get me all the way back.
Trump hospitalized after worsening symptoms require oxygen in the White House.
His oxygen saturation levels. Yesterday morning, we were real concerned with that.
Has he ever been on supplemental oxygen?
Right now, he is not on oxygen.
I know you, but should we read into the fact that he had been previously?
Yesterday and today, he was not on oxygen.
He had a fever, and his blood oxygen level had dropped rapidly.
Conflicting accounts from the president's doctor and his staff create a crisis of credibility.
I know a number of us, the doctor and I, were very concerned.
He's in such great spirits and doing well.
Why was the decision made to transfer him here?
Because he's the president of the United States.
As the virus spreads through the White House, Trump's campaign, and the Senate.
3 more people tested positive for the virus.
Hope Hicks testing positive.
Kellyanne Conway tweeted, "Tonight I tested positive."
2 GOP senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee have tested positive for COVID.
It seems to grow by the minute.
Mounting questions about the safety of the president, the stability of our country, and the state of the race for the White House in this final month of voting.
This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously.
I look forward to finishing up the campaign the way it was started.
From ABC News, this is a special edition of This Week. Here now, Chief Anchor George Stephanopoulos.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. What a week it has been. When we signed off last week's show, here's what we didn't know. That President Trump had paid just $750 in income tax in 2016 and 2017. On the hook now for several $100 million in debt come due in a second term. That Tuesday's debate would be widely labeled the worst presidential debate ever, with President Trump bearing most of the blame. That the Rose Garden ceremony celebrating Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court would turn out to be a super spreader for the coronavirus. As we come on the air this morning, at least 8 of the attendees have tested positive for COVID, including, of course, First Lady Melania Trump and the President of the United States. And with President Trump now being treated at Walter Reed, the country is now facing a cascade of crises in a chaotic year. A personal health crisis for the president, compounded by a credibility crisis for his White House during a public health crisis that has cost more than 209,000 Americans their lives, all with 1 month to go in a presidential election unlike any we've seen before. We're going to try to make sense of it all this morning, starting with our team of correspondents. John Carl is at Walter Reed. And John, the repetition of falsehoods, the refusal to give straight answers has been a hallmark of the Trump White House. It reached something of a peak yesterday.
George, on one hand, it was a welcome development to see the White House doctor come out and brief reporters, but it was frankly maddening to see the medical team refuse to answer so many questions and to be spinning as if this were just another political briefing. Dr. Conley refused to answer basic questions such as, how high is the president's temperature? He would not say. Has the president been on supplemental oxygen? As you saw, he wouldn't say. We later learned that, in fact, on Friday, the president was on oxygen. Dr. Conley also bent over backwards to try to put a positive spin on things, saying that the president had been fever-free for 24 hours, that he, quote, is doing great. But minutes after that briefing ended yesterday, a person described as somebody familiar with the president's health briefed the press pool here and said, quote, the president's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning, and the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care. We are still not on a clear path to a full recovery. That starkly different assessment, multiple news organizations identified the person as none other than the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Now, overnight, we learned that yet another person close to the president has tested positive for coronavirus. Nick Luna, that's the president's personal aide, somebody who travels with him virtually everywhere he goes. He has been tested positive for coronavirus. Perhaps the most reliable information throughout all of this actually came from the president himself with a 4-minute video that he posted to Twitter yesterday. And George, I've got to say, the president looked good for somebody going through all that he is going through right now.
I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, yet another bombshell for America to deal with as the government and Campaign 2020 are thrown into turmoil after the president contracts COVID-19. For a president who thrives on creating chaos, his diagnosis has inadvertently shifted the course of the last month of campaign 2020 and created a crisis in government. What's making matters worse? The administration's dramatically conflicting reports on the president's condition. 24 hours after being admitted to Walter Reed Hospital, Mr. Trump took to social media to contradict his own chief of staff.
I came here, wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now.
But the mystery of where, when, and from whom he contracted the virus is growing, as is the number of those in Mr. Trump's inner circle who have tested positive. The race to contact trace is now potentially a matter of life or death, as attendees from all three branches of government attended this Rose Garden event a week ago. Now an additional Republican senator has also contracted the virus, potentially spreading it further on Capitol Hill. It's a sobering development for a White House that has downplayed the severity of the virus.
This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously.
We'll talk with White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, plus House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb will be with us, as well as the head of one of the largest testing labs in the U.S., Adam Schechter of LabCorp. Plus, a Face the Nation focus group, 2020 style.
Can I see a show of hands from those of you who believe that the news of the president's illness will affect the presidential campaign?
So when I heard that he had coronavirus, I guess I wasn't surprised.
Well, I'm a firm believer in karma. I just am. The president just have never taken this seriously.
It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we come on the air, the country is facing yet another unprecedented crisis as President Trump remains hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Center. And there are new questions this morning about how the administration is handling his case. We begin today with White House correspondent Weijia Jiang.
From his suite at Walter Reed Medical Center, President Trump took to Twitter last night to say he's feeling better, but acknowledged his condition could take a turn.
You don't know over the next period of a few days. I guess that's the real test.
The president's address capped off a day of mixed messaging from the White House. President Trump's doctors painted an optimistic picture of his health.
This morning, the president is doing very well.
CBS News has learned the president did receive oxygen at the White House Friday before leaving for Walter Reed. And just 10 minutes after the medical briefing wrapped up on Saturday, a person familiar with the president's health, identified by the Associated Press as Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, told reporters his vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning. We're still not on a clear path to a full recovery. The president revealed he and the First Lady have the coronavirus in an early morning tweet on Friday. They are at the top of a growing list of people who have tested positive after attending last Saturday's Rose Garden event where President Trump nominated his new Supreme Court Justice, Judge Amy Coney Barrett. President Trump's former advisor, Kellyanne Conway, and Chris Christie said they have the virus. Yesterday, the former New Jersey governor tweeted that he checked himself into the hospital due to his history of asthma. Utah Senator Mike Lee and North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis also tested positive after attending the event. And now Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson has contracted the virus. Despite those lawmakers getting sick, GOP Senate leaders are moving forward with Barrett's nomination as scheduled. They hold a slim 3-seat majority, and a final vote only counts if it's cast in person. So if the virus continues to spread, it could cripple Barrett's chances.
President Trump's doctors say he is doing better, but he's not out of the woods yet. He spent his second night at Walter Reed last night, and we are awaiting an update from his medical team this morning. Margaret?
I'm Chris Wallace. The country in a state of uncertainty after President Trump contracts the coronavirus and ends up in the hospital. This this hour, we're monitoring the health of the president after he, the First Lady, and top advisors test positive.
I came here, wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now.
Every day we're evaluating, does he need to be here? What does he need? And where's he going?
We'll address the president's condition, the continuity of our government, and the impact on the election with Trump campaign senior advisor Steve Cortes. And we'll ask Dr. Tom Inglesby, head of the Center for Health Security, about the president's health and the nation's. Then, the diagnosis rocks the race for the White House.
Sending my prayers for the health and safety of the First Lady and President of the United States.
We'll talk with a top Biden supporter, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. And we'll ask our Sunday panel about yet another turbulent week in the 2020 race for the White House. All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with the latest on President Trump's health. He remains hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Center just outside Washington, where he's battling the coronavirus. But there are conflicting reports on his status. The president's doctors painted a rosy picture, reporting yesterday he was doing very well. But a senior official later identified as White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows told reporters the president's vital signs were very concerning, and the next 48 hours will be critical to his care. In a moment, we'll try to clear this up with Steve Cortes, senior advisor for the Trump campaign. But first, let's bring in Kristen Fisher at Walter Reed Medical Center with the latest on the president's condition. Kristen.
Good morning, Chris. President Trump's physician says that the president continues to do well, but he is not out of the woods just yet.
Over the next period of a few days, I guess that's the real test. So we'll be seeing what happens over those next couple of days.
President Trump releasing a 4-minute video Saturday night from inside Walter Reed Medical Center, where he is fighting the same virus that has killed more than 200,000 Americans. When the president was admitted, the White House said it was done out of an abundance of caution. But we now know the mild symptoms that Chief of Staff Mark Meadows had said the president was experiencing were actually much more serious.
He's made unbelievable improvements from yesterday morning when I know a number of us, the doctor and I, were very concerned.
On Saturday morning, Meadows said the president had gone through a very concerning period and was still not on a clear path to recovery. But mere minutes earlier and just steps away, the president's physician gave a brighter assessment.
The team and I are extremely happy with the progress the president has made.
It's still unclear exactly when or where the president contracted the virus, but the White House medical unit is looking at last Saturday's Rose Garden ceremony for Judge Amy Coney Barrett. At least 7 people who attended have now tested positive. Changes have now been made to the vice presidential debate, which is just 3 days away. Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris will now be seated 12 feet apart instead of 7, but it is still very unclear if the next presidential debate will even happen. Chris?
This Sunday, the president's health. The White House calls the president's condition very concerning, contradicting his doctor's upbeat public assessment.
This morning, the president is doing very well.
The White House scrambling last night to get on the same page.
He's made unbelievable improvements from yesterday morning when I know a number of us, the doctor and I, were very concerned.
Mr. Trump releasing a video from Walter Reed Hospital last night.
I came here, wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now. We're working hard to get me all the way back. I have to be back.
The virus now spreading among those who attended White House events. How serious is the president's condition? Can we trust anything from the White House? My guest this morning, senior advisor to the Trump campaign, Jason Miller, and Dr. Nahid Bhadelia of Boston University. Plus, debate fallout.
Vote now. Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're senator. I'm not going to answer the question because the question is radical left. Will you shut up, man?
President Trump's relentless hectoring of Joe Biden.
You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me.
Results in a lost opportunity to make up ground.
Self-centered.
Unbalanced.
Corrupt.
and a big shift towards Biden in our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. Joining me for insight and analysis are former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, Wall Street Journal columnist Peggy Noonan, Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, and former Obama White House Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. If there's any good to come from the terribly unsettling news that the President of the United States has been infected and hospitalized with the coronavirus, it is this. Perhaps Americans who have flouted medical advice to social distance and wear masks will now take this disease a lot more seriously. This is all happening just as the country is experiencing a rise in cases amid fears that colder weather will lead to yet another deadly wave of the pandemic. Yesterday, the White House initially offered a far less upbeat report on Mr. Trump's condition than his doctors did, creating public confusion and further doubts about whether we can trust what this administration ever tells us. There are many questions still to be answered. Can and should Vice President Pence campaign while Mr. Trump is hospitalized? Will there be more presidential debates, and if so, will they be in person? And could Senate Republican plans for Amy Coney Barrett's fast-track confirmation get derailed? The news came after a debate performance that was roundly criticized for the president's behavior. Our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows a dramatic change in an election that had been free of dramatic changes until now. Joe Biden leads Mr. Trump among registered voters by a shocking 14 points, 53-39, under 40. By far, Joe Biden's biggest lead in our poll so far. Just 2 weeks ago, Biden's lead was just 8 points, 51-43. Word of caution, our pollsters point out that this poll was taken right after a consequential and extraordinarily unsettling event, that debate. Translation, these numbers could be quite volatile. So we're going to wait to see if this Biden surge is a short-term thing or part of a trend. We have the news covered from all angles, and we begin with our own Kelly O'Donnell at Walter Reed Medical Center. So Kelly, what is the latest on the president's condition? And I guess I have to qualify it. And who's telling us the latest on the president's condition?
Well, good morning, Chuck. The president's physician has given us the most recent snapshot saying that the president is making progress, but making clear he still faces serious risk. Now, the issue of transparency with the president's health is critical. And what we've had so far has been conflicting, contradictory information, even corrections coming from the White House. One example, on Friday, when we first learned of the diagnosis, the official line from the White House was mild symptoms. Now we know from the chief of staff that at that same time, the president's doctors were worried, and they were particularly concerned about a rapid drop of his oxygen level. Still, the president's physician is not saying publicly if he ever received supplemental oxygen, and yet put out a memo that said the president no longer has a fever and is off supplemental oxygen. So there's been this kind of confusion about who is providing information and how clear that information is. We also know the president doesn't want to leave the messaging to others, not his doctors, not his chief of staff, not the White House staff. So he put out a 4-minute video that we know was recorded inside the hospital in part of the presidential suite, which includes office space for the president in addition to the medical treatment like remdesivir, which he is getting over a course of several days. And in that, he talked about his own condition, acknowledged that there are still difficult days ahead when his condition will need to be monitored carefully, but also talked about wanting to get back on the campaign trail. It's so clear that the most watched patient in the world wants to have some control over the message and how the public perceives his condition. Chuck?
Kelly O'Donnell getting us started right outside Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Kelly, thanks very much.